Hello and welcome to the Empowered Couples Podcast, where here you get modern, non-boring relationship advice for you and your partner to communicate like pros, fight smarter, and stay on the same team no matter the challenge that you face. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman.
And I'm Jocelyn Freeman, but you all just know us as the Freemans.
This episode is about rebuilding trust after promises are broken, both small and big promises.
Trust is always a big topic, and I think this episode is going to apply if, big things have been broken in your relationship, but also really pay attention if you feel like the small things have added up. And just to give you context as to where this came from, we received an email question from a listener, which, by the way, we love hearing from all of you. We love that you're engaging with the content, asking us follow-up questions. And this listener was saying, hey, I listened to your episode on reliability and follow-through, which, by the way, is episode 178 if you haven't listened, a really important episode. And this person wanted us to go deeper into rebuilding broken trust. And in this relationship in particular, it was like the small things adding up. Like, okay, they keep saying these things, and this doesn't happen, and this doesn't happen. And it's like all these small things really adding up. So we said, let's do it. We listened to the listeners.
Yeah. And the thing about trust is it's really not about the big events. It's not really like the physical or emotional infidelity. Those things are obviously those bigger breaches of trust. But trust in a relationship for the majority of time is in the small things. Mm-hmm. And it really does happen in the daily activities to where fundamentally it's the idea of, can I count on my partner?
Exactly.
To me, that's the kind of the definition of trust, if you will. Can I count on my partner? Mm-hmm. Now, I believe, and I'm saying I because we hadn't really talked about this specifically, but I think trust to me is maybe the most foundational thing to have in a relationship. That's why this topic is so important. If the trust is not there, then the respect isn't there. If I don't trust someone, especially my partner, let me say that. If I don't trust my partner, I don't respect them. And for men, feeling respect from our partner is huge. So just interesting, if you're listening to this, notice, oh my gosh, have I not been one that's fully, notice how we'll say count-onable here, meaning trustworthy. And if so, that might be a part of why I don't feel like I've been respected. So it's just a place to really start to look for yourself. Now, just tying this together, trust, respect, and if you don't have the respect, I don't know how you could really have the passion and the drive and that kind of love for a partner. That's why I think trust is so foundational.
It is foundational. Everything else is built upon it. And you're going to hear throughout this episode how it really is about the two of you creating trust. It's not all on your partner, by the way. This is going to be a two-person, quote-unquote, game to rebuild and strengthen trust. And I want to give you an analogy. And Aaron is much better at analogies, so let me try this one and see how I do.
We'll see.
He might need to fix
better.
it. Okay, so think about a bike wheel, right? And there are spokes on the wheel. Well, think about maintaining trust as maintaining the integrity of the bike wheel. If all of a sudden one small, we'll call it quote unquote, small promise is broken, one spoke is gone. Can you keep riding? Yeah, you can keep riding.
Do you even fully notice that the bike and the wheel is not performing at its highest level? Maybe not.
Yeah, it's not, you're just kind of keep going, right? Second spoke is broken because of another small, quote unquote, promise is broken. Can you start to feel it then? There might be a little bit more like kind of some bounciness with the wheel.
Slight wobble.
Yeah, a little bit of a wobble. A third one, you can definitely start to feel it, right? The integrity of the wheel is lost. So you want to be going faster, farther, but you can't. The integrity isn't there in the wheel. If all of a sudden there are no spokes, you are on the ground. No, you have fallen. The wheel has no integrity and you are just down and out.
Loving your analogy, and I don't even know if you have to get down to the last spoke.
Yeah.
When you get to a certain amount, maybe 25%, the rest of them are probably just going to break.
Exactly. And so that's really the analogy to think of with trust, is usually it's a small breakdown over time that's building up, and you lose the integrity of your word and being able to trust your partner's word.
And that was more so what we talked about in that episode 178. So let's dive into the more daily, small, specific things that can break trust. And again, we want to say that would make it seem as if you're not count-onable. So the very first one is not keeping the small daily promises that you make.
Some examples.
And how this will live as far as a thought, maybe even a belief for your partner, would be that they can't count on you for what you say. And this is actually coming specifically from the email that we got. And it was like this for her in particular. You know, she had asked her partner, hey, will you read The Argument Hangover with me? He said, yeah, of course. You know, I'll read chapter whatever. And then he didn't. And then it was a couple of days. She asked him again, hey, I want to read this book together. Oh, yeah, I'll do that. And then didn't. Then it would be something like, oh, yeah, I'm going to put a timeline together to, let's say, find a new job. Simple thing enough. A few days go by. Nothing happens. I'll schedule time for us to talk and plan out, let's say, our future or finances or a trip or anything. Nothing ever comes together. No planned time. How about I'll make time for our daughter? This was from a different client, actually. One partner shared that, hey, it really seems like it'd be beneficial if you made more time for our daughter, spent that time together. Oh, yeah, I'm going to do that. Then that doesn't happen. Or I'll make even more time for friends. I mean, these sound so simple, and then nothing happens.
And that is really where that thought and that belief comes up, like you said, of, can I count on you for what you say? You say one thing, you do another. So that's a big piece. Another thing.
One small thing, just that you said. Notice how it's not really like, can I count on you for what you say? It's actually like, can I count on you? So notice how it's literally your word. The things that you say is equal to who you are. Notice how there can't be any difference. I know we relate to like, oh, I could just say whatever. Like they're, you know what? And this is part of the integrity. If I just say, oh, those are just like words. No, what you say out to other people is who you are. So when your partner thinks, I can't count on you for what you say, it's actually like, I can't count on you. Because your word, again, is literally who you are.
Exactly. Another kind of quote unquote, what can be perceived as smaller thing that breaks trust is not being consistent in terms of if you say there's going to be a change in your attitude, your behavior, a certain communication pattern. But then after a few days of what people say, you've been on good behavior. But then a few days later, you're back to your old patterns. And this really brings up the thought and the belief, like, will this really last? When my partner says, okay, yeah, I'm gonna be a better communicator. Okay, yes, I'm gonna do this for us. Or I'm going to be more joyful. I'm gonna be a better listener. But then they only do it for a few days. It makes you think, maybe I can count on you like seasonally, or I can count on you for a few days, but I can't count on you consistently. So that's a big one. And then the next one is huge, is not creating emotional safety. So you say, yes, I want to understand you, but then you really react harshly. You're triggered by what your partner shares, their emotion. And so that builds up this whole thought and belief of, am I really safe to open up to you? I feel like I can't open up to you. There's certain conversations I have to tiptoe around and I can't bring this up, right? So that is trust. Can I trust you so that I can be vulnerable? And if I can't be vulnerable with you, that's missing a whole huge piece of a relationship.
Some might relate to that as trust you with my heart.
Yes.
Which, of course, because that's where we relate to emotions being. But if you are bringing up something that you feel is hard to bring up, as you said, vulnerable, and then all your partner does is invalidate it. And I think we talked about this a little bit as well. We know that there is some good intent to say, oh, I don't want you to feel bad, partner. But then you say things like, you shouldn't feel that way. as positive that intent is, that doesn't have your partner feel safe because this is the emotion they're feeling. And they're trying to reveal that. And often we're all just trying to reveal to our partner so that we can be known within ourselves. That's a part of what a relationship is. So if I say something and then immediately it's met with, well, that doesn't make sense, or, oh, you don't have to feel that way. It just has me feel like I'm going to close my heart down.
Exactly.
And I feel unsafe to share.
So true. And then the last one we wanted to bring up here about things that can slowly erode trust is not being completely authentic and honest about what's going on inside of you when you're having a hard conversation. And you can elaborate from your perspective on this, Aaron, but from me, it's like, if we're having a meaningful, important conversation in our relationship and I feel as though you're really holding something back, you're not saying the whole truth about how you feel or your perspective, you're trying to tell me just what I want to hear, or you're trying not to create a conflict, but I can tell something else is there. It brings up this thought of like, are you really saying everything you mean? Like, I don't feel as though you're being totally transparent. And that can be really frustrating and disempowering because you want to feel that connection to your partner, but it's like you feel almost like you don't have access to them. Like, hello, like, let me in. And this was big with a client last week, was just like, I want you to open up to me. Like, please trust me to open up to me. And I think that's really important.
Well, going a little bit further, it's not just in hard conversations, it's with all the time.
True.
It is that if you give compliance type of answers, yes, I'll do that, or even if you're keeping things bottled up, again, for this quote unquote positive intent that I don't want to burden you as a partner, I don't want to seem negative or that I have a bad attitude because, and this was from another client, because I love you too much.
And I don't want to be a burden or
it's a lie. It's a lie that you are telling yourself to keep safety, some sense of safety within yourself, when you can't just walk around bottling things up or saying things are fine, when clearly if you're unhappy about something, you're withdrawn, you feel passive, you're not fully engaging with your partner, and you're just trying to kind of get by and do the activities, this can be felt by your partner.
Exactly.
I don't know where we got to this place where we thought, I'm just going to tell my partner, because of whatever positive intent I have, things are fine. I'm not going to share. I know I'm a little bit unhappy over here, but I'm not going to really look at it for myself. I'm not going to share it. Your partner knows. They can feel it. They might not know the exact thing, but your partner absolutely knows. And they might say something that's like, something seems quote unquote off for you. But what happens? And you get defensive. Nothing's off. I didn't say anything. Why would you think that? When you know in your body, in your heart, you're not being honest with yourself or fully truthful with your partner, even if it's not about them, about something in your life. And when this is happening, when your partner feels like there is something else that you're not saying, even just day to day, this erodes trust.
Exactly. And that's why I love this last one, because it can be one that's looked over. It's like, okay, I trust you even more if you say the hard truths. If you tell me the things that are even hard to hear, but you're honest, you're authentic, you're transparent, I feel like I can rest assured that you're not sitting there with something on your mind or heart and just holding it against me, and that one day you're going to blindside me with it. Like, I trust you that you're going to bring something up to me that's important.
Or that something is being hidden.
Exactly.
I would say that's probably another big thing too, because it's like there's clearly something. Why won't you share with me? And this just creates this thought pattern for your partner. There's something they don't trust me in. So that just kind of has this ripple effect of, well, I can't trust them now.
Yeah, it definitely is a two-way street. And in a moment, we're going to get into some steps for rebuilding trust. I first want to address what is not enough to rebuild trust, which is commonly tried, it's attempted, and it's not enough. And that is just saying, I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. And you can even plea and get dramatic about it. Like, please forgive me. That's not enough. Right? It's maybe a start, but it's not going to be the whole picture and you'll hear why. Or just saying like, yeah, okay, I'll work on that. Especially if you think your partner's bringing to you things that seem small to you. Like, really? This is that big of a deal to you, but you promise them these things?
Oh, yeah.
You can't just say, okay, I'll work on it. They're supposed to just take your word for that? What does that mean to them? Okay,
well,
yeah.
How can they? Your word is already cheapened because it's lost its own value because of any one of the things we've already talked about. Because your word doesn't cause action. I thought of that just earlier today. So if your partner can't trust you then with simple things, how can they end up trusting you with anything bigger?
Exactly. And I want to share that because just saying I'm sorry is not enough, or okay, I'll work on it, please just forgive me this time. What's going to really start to get the ball rolling in rebuilding trust is showing them that you're committed to taking new actions. And we're going to go into some specific steps, but 2 of the bigger actions that you can take, the most meaningful, the most potent, the ones that are going to really stand out to your partner, is by doing something that is about relationship building. Saying, yes, I do want to do what it takes to strengthen our relationship. I'm willing to put in the work to change my patterns. That willingness is really, really important. And so 2 quick ways you can do that with more support than even just the podcast episode. First one, if you're in Arizona, near Arizona, or you want to travel to Arizona, we are hosting our last in-person couples workshop on September 26th. And you do not want to miss this day for your relationship, for communication exercises, for a safe space where you have uninterrupted time. Your kids aren't coming in, work's not coming in, you're not distracted by outside things. So you want to make sure you save your seats for September 26th. Go to thecouplesworkshop.com for that Arizona. If you are sad you can't make that for some reason, you don't live anywhere near here, then another great step is to do a relationship breakthrough session with us. This is where we get on with you 2-on-2. And we support you in getting to the root of things, like have the breakthrough, stop being stuck. And you can read more about our relationship breakthrough sessions at meetthefreemans.com/coaching. And both of those links will be in the show notes. So we just wanted to share those first because that is really putting your walking the walk. You're not just talking the talk, you're walking the walk when you do either of those things. But Aaron, you want to start to go into what some of the initial steps can be to rebuilding trust.
Yeah, and as we go into these steps, depending on the size of the broken promise, and when we mean size, we actually mean more like the amount of even small times that trust has been broken. So both, maybe you feel like there was one bigger thing, but also if it's just been any one of the number of things we've talked about, if that's been happening consistently in your relationship, maybe the order of these things might be a little bit different. But here are some overall steps. The first kind of overall step is to recognize. And you need to, both as the partner that is feeling like they can't trust the other, as well as, and I acknowledge you if this is you listening right now, starting to see that, wow, I am recognizing maybe I've been eroding trust with my partner because of not being my word in some of these places. We'll give a few things on both sides, but complete recognition and acknowledgement that a promise has been broken.
And that means not undermining it or being like, it shouldn't be that big of a deal.
Well,
come on.
First of all, we're also not just saying like the big promises either.
The small things.
Look, go back to the first thing we mentioned. Like, it might not seem like a promise to get a book out and read it, but it is. You're giving your word to these things. So acknowledgement of where you have put your word out there. It's been landed in the eardrum and gotten into the mind and belief of your partner. You have to start to acknowledging where those types of promises are broken.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like being willing. You have to humble yourself sometimes. And this is for both of you. Yeah. We really are saying this to both of you, to humble yourself, to not make it about, I'm a terrible person. And so I don't want to acknowledge that I broke a promise. No, humble yourself and just acknowledge, hey, I have been telling you I would do this, and this, and I haven't followed through. Your partner will be amazed.
Yes, absolutely. And if that's as far as you get, that's perfect. I got a thumbs up right here.
We still have more going. But
the second part of that, though, if you really want to rebuild trust, let's say with your partner in this case, you would acknowledge, wow, I really see that just the small things. I know I said I was going to read a book with you. I know I said I was going to plan, let's say, a trip, or I was going to set up the time for us to have our family meeting, or even look into this couples workshop thing that the Freemans have and see if we would do that. And I haven't done that. If you then pause and say, I want to hear from you, what's been that impact on you? That is the best question you could ask.
Yes.
That allows your partner to really release that emotion that I would say has been getting in the way of them trusting.
Yes. And if trust, whether it doesn't matter, like we've said multiple times, if you feel that rock solid trust is missing, either because of a couple bigger things or a bunch of small things, either way, if the two of you really want to rebuild trust, it has to be a commitment for both of you. And truly, it needs to be the two of you saying, we're going to do this. Rebuilding trust is not a one-person game. It really does take the two of you being committed to acknowledging where there are broken promises, what happened to the trust in the relationship, and wanting to rebuild it. It really is a team sport to rebuild this trust.
And, for there to be real healing, because that's what we ultimately feel is needed, a healing of the trust. And that both people have to want to do it. So my question to you, kind of on the spot, is, well, what if I'm the person listening to this podcast right now, and I'm feeling like trust has been broken with me, and my partner is not seeing it that way, or when I try to bring it up, there's some defensiveness, or they just don't see it that way, or they bring up someplace that I haven't been doing something. How do you get a partner to get on this same page? If what you're saying is both are needed, what would I even say?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would want to get to know that person a little bit more, because there's something in the way they're perceiving it that's blocking them, right? And for people to change their action, they have to change the way they're perceiving something. So I think the approach is different for different personalities, different types of people, and you may have to attempt it different ways. Don't give up with just one try of, trying to bring up trust. It might take different approaches. Number one, you can send them this podcast episode like, hey, I really feel this is something we need to work on personally. It would mean a lot if you would listen to this. So that's one way that you can start it. Another way is, let's say you're on a walk. Like, we're big fans of bringing up these kind of quote unquote heavier conversations when you're in movement. And so you could be on a walk and just say, I've been reflecting, and I really feel like I could use some work on rebuilding trust in our relationship. And I know that might be hard to hear, but I would really love it if you would devote yourself with me to looking at this trust thing. And so you can try it that way. Another way is, let's say you've done that a few times, and now you need to get straight up with them. And this is some of the coaching we had to give to one of the partners of a couple we're working with this last week, was like, it's time to be straight up, super straightforward. Like, no being gentle about it. It is, we are in a period of breakdown, and I need you to pay attention to here right now. Like, I want us to have a breakthrough, but you are not acknowledging what is going on, and I'm at a breaking point. So there becomes a point, if you've attempted, I'm not saying start there, but if you have attempted multiple more gentle, loving conversations, inviting them into it, and they're resistant, don't give up. There becomes a point where you need to be so straight up, and you need to put your heart on the line, and you need to tell them you're at a breaking point, and you need to say, I really need you to step up to the plate and work on this. Like, for me, it's getting to the point where I can't just keep dancing around this. So sometimes you get to this point where you just got to be straight up and have that hard conversation.
Yeah, and I think it's important when you do that, just to see the energy that you have. And just so that doesn't sound conceptual, the energy is really the attitude in which you are bringing this forth. So like Jocelyn said, you can actually have this very bold, straightforward conversation, but just check in with yourself. Is this coming from a diminishing your partner? Do you have anger inside yourself? Or are you sharing this with your partner from a place of like urgency? Right? Urgency is different than anger.
So true.
Or being very reactive is different than you reflected. And this is really important. This is critical for the relationship. And it's authentic for yourself. That's different than putting your partner down, pointing out flaws, being angry, or even, like trying to lash out or express all this pent up emotion outward
and they're like,
and
where's this
project
coming
it
from?
onto your partner. Yeah. So love what you said. The one step before that I thought of, before you get to the point of it's going to have to be said like this, you could also share the positive intent. We say that a lot. Hey, I listen to this podcast and I'm really intent to strengthen our marriage. And I really want to talk about trust. And I was listening to this podcast, and I know it's not always about intent, but I really want to share some areas where I feel like trust has been broken. And I would like to hear from you as well, just so that we both can look at some areas where we can build trust for each other.
Absolutely.
So you have a positive intent, you're sharing what's real, but also that your partner is going to be a participant, not that you're just going to lay all this stuff down on them.
And they've got to be a participant. That's the thing. And that might be one of the hard truths that you need to talk to them about is, are you willing to participate in rebuilding trust? Because like Aaron said at the beginning, this is foundational. You cannot create passion and romance and love and joy and respect on top of a lack of trust. And so you may need to be like, I need to really check out if my partner is willing to participate in rebuilding trust, because you deserve that. Both of you deserve that.
So that's the first one. It's recognition, and there's recognition on both sides for both partners. The second one, Jocelyn, is reflection. And I think this is more for the partner that's listening, thinking to themselves, wow, there actually is some places I have broken my word, and my partner probably has some diminished trust. And the question for you then with reflection is, what's the real source of this broken promise? Like, really, for me, what is the real source of why I said even these small things to my partner and I did not do them?
Exactly. And the reason this step is important is and kind of linked to why just saying I'm sorry or I'll work on it doesn't work, is because it should, like, if you just say I'm sorry, you're missing out on the lesson. You didn't actually reflect on why, exactly like you said, why would I promise my partner these things and then not follow through? There is a reason. Our behavior comes from our beliefs. And so you've got to do that deeper looking as, okay, if I took this action or didn't take this action, that's coming from some internal perception or something going on internally. And the source of these small or big broken promises can be so many different things. And some of them can be more logically driven and some can be more emotionally driven. I'll give a couple examples and then you can, Aaron, as well. It could be logically like a lack of structure. You keep promising your partner all these things, but really you're overwhelmed. You actually don't have the time for it, or you don't have anywhere that you write them down. Or
you actually just don't have a good memory. And that's been said to us by a few couples like, oh, I just don't remember. That's no excuse. You have like apps like Todoist that will remind you. You have a Google Calendar. So yes, do you authentically not remember things? Okay, that could be true. No excuse for not having some piece of technology. And the real deep technological piece, a Post-it note. You can put a Post-it note somewhere where you see it. So that's not an excuse, but to your point, like, you just might not remember.
Yes.
But that means that you have to take responsibility for remembering somehow, some way. Even if it's not your own memory, it's like a phone.
Exactly. And then the next piece that can be both logical and emotional, is that you're really not committed to the things you're saying yes to or that you'll do.
Wow.
So you're like, yeah, because you want to appease your partner, you want to make them happy, but really you're like, I'm probably not going to do that one, you know? Or
wow, that's a high-pitched thought.
That was
there.
pretty high-pitched. But basically, and I don't know how many episodes, if we've really said this, I know we bring this up on coaching sessions, but there's a difference between a compliance yes and a commitment yes. And so if you're saying yes to your partner out of compliance and then you don't follow through, you are really not doing what is best for both you and your partner. You have to really check out, are my yeses truly commitment yeses? Mm-hmm. And your commitment is going to be shown in your action. Kind of to your point, Aaron, about the structure. If you're actually committed to it, you will do what it takes. Put it in your calendar. Like, that's why I'm so grateful for the system that we've implemented, because you and I don't rely on our memory. You'd use Todoist.
Not at all. I mean, I don't rely on my memory. Like,
everything that we promise to each other, even if it's a small thing, like, I will make us a dentist appointment, which I did recently for both of us. I didn't rely on my memory, and then you're upset at me, a month later for like, hey, I was kind of counting on you to make dentist appointments for us. True. I'm like, I will take that on. I gave my word to that, and then I put it in my freaking calendar.
Which is shared, and I have no idea when it is, but the calendar is going to tell me the day before and then 15 minutes before I got to leave.
But then even the, kind of not as much appointment-y things, if you tell me there's something you're going to quote unquote work on, and I think I've mentioned this in an episode before about our relationship, what I really appreciate about you is you put it somewhere visible for yourself, like either in your notepad or your phone or something. You don't just go, yeah, I hear you. Okay. Yep. I'll work on, the way I'm listening. No, you have it somewhere in your attention, somewhere visible that you can see it. So that's when you're really committed to something. You're not just saying it out of compliance.
One part of this with the compliance I felt was slightly different is a feeling of obligation. Mm-hmm. I don't personally relate to this in our relationship, but I do know that some people could feel a sense of obligation to say yes. And it could be a couple of different things. Over time, you just don't feel you could say no to your partner. And maybe it's because they've gotten upset before, or maybe they don't feel like you are on their team or have their back or whatever it is. So there could be a sense of obligation. Or maybe it's a positive thing, right? Like going to a kid's sporting event. Like, hey, will you be there tonight? Yeah. Because you feel obligated not only to your partner, but to your kids to show up when you knew that there was something that you already had, or you had to work something out, or you were going to forget, whatever it was. You can't just say yes just out of obligation. Mm-hmm. So you also just don't say no and shut your partner down. You would say
no. All of a sudden they're like, what the heck?
You really have to be real and truthful about what you have going on, other things that you've planned, and at times when you feel like that's just authentically not the thing you want to do right now. Mm-hmm. But you can say, oh, well, I'm not feeling going to the game, but I know it means this to you, or I know it means X to our child. Mm-hmm. So I'll make sure I spend time after the game or set up a time for the weekend to quote unquote make up for it. Mm-hmm. So it's not just a no and then it's cut off. It's, hey, I can't do this. It's authentic, but I know here's why this is important. So let's find a different way to fulfill on that need.
It is so true. No one wants to do things just out of obligation in the relationship.
And I have one other thing kind of with that is about expectations not being expressed. So you might say yes to something and then not do it primarily because you need to look at the source of, do you have an expectation about your partner should be the one to do that, or they shouldn't have to ask you? And it's really powerful to look, do I have an expectation of my partner or of myself or of our children? Mm-hmm. And you can't just keep that inside and then be compliant or feel obligation. You have to take responsibility to express these expectations that you have and not just go along with things or just say things to appease people.
That's very, very true. I think another important thing to look at as a potential source for broken promises and not following through, big or small, is things that are going on personally that need to be worked through. And this can be more like short-term things and also long-term things. And what I mean by that is it may be a season where one of you, and this has been coming up with different clients, is one of you is going through a personally hard time. Things maybe aren't going that well at work. Maybe you're not feeling that great in terms of your relationship with your children. You're feeling really challenged by that. And it's bringing up a lot of emotion for you. And so that is having you show up less than your best in your relationship and not keeping all the small promises. Now, of course, you're not doing that out of malintent. You're not a malicious person that's like, I'm not going to keep all these small promises to my partner, but you're so consumed by some of these things you're personally dealing with. I mean, mental health is really big right now. It could be anxiety, depression-like symptoms, even if it's not, a complete diagnosis. It could be, just overwhelm. You could be really hard on yourself. So if you're overwhelmed with some of these personal matters, then of course that's going to impact you keeping the promises to your partner. So you may need to look at that. Okay, wow, I need to take on my mental and emotional health so that I am following through.
Yeah, I think this has a lot to do with self-image.
True.
So if you have said that you were going to do a number of things, and not just to your partner, you have said in your own mind, I'm going to pursue this. I want to be at this stage. I want to experience this. I want to grow here. And then you don't do it. It diminishes your own image of yourself to where you don't trust yourself because you know that you don't do the things that you've said that you were going to do in your own mind. Mm-hmm. And also that you in this thread have squashed or silenced your own intuition. And I think this is a big thing too. And when you don't have a self-image that's super empowered and you trust yourself, you also don't trust your intuition. You don't know the difference between fear thoughts or ego thoughts and then those thoughts or those intuitions that come from your true self. So it's very muddy and you question yourself, you doubt yourself, and you kind of live in a place of confusion.
Wow.
About what to do.
Yes. And that's something that you got to really look at because that's a deeper source of why trust can be broken in the relationship. And some of these also can be, so I talked about short-term ones, right? Like you seasonally you're going through something that's impacting you, but also longer term. Perhaps you're showing up in the relationship not following through because of something from your past that you're either resentful about, or perhaps you saw your parents not follow through and you're almost unconsciously repeating the past. So sometimes it is deeper rooted things. Some people even have the belief that you don't have to be that honest about everything. Well, you got to confront that crappy belief. If that's something that your parents said to you or they showed you was, oh, hey, the way to not rock the boat is by not telling the complete truth, you need to confront that belief. And you got to go, that doesn't work. It's not working for my marriage. A lot of marriages end because of crappy beliefs that were formed from their upbringing and formative relationships. So again, it may be something internally that you got to work through. And that's why, we're always the biggest advocates for doing the work as individuals and as a couple, because there are deeper reasons as to why you would not keep promises. And you can't just step over that and just, again, be like, I'm sorry, I'll work on that. There's something deeper to really look at.
So the takeaway for the other partner, because we were primarily talking about reflecting, if you're noticing that you haven't been truthful or keeping to your word, i.e. being accountable to your partner, then for the partner listening here that thinks this is happening for the other partner, you want to acknowledge that there is something like what we've talked about here happening for them. You don't just want to start attacking them or thinking that they're not accountable just because they didn't follow through on the book or taking the kid to soccer or planning the trip or any of the things that we've talked about. You have to recognize that there's probably something deeper happening for them. So don't just come at them with, I can't trust you because of all this. Ask some questions that get down to the root of some of the things that we talked about. So it doesn't have to be a specific conversation where you sit down and say, hey, I want to talk about the source and root of your lack of trustworthiness. But ask some questions about, hey, has there been any places where you feel like you haven't trusted your own intuition? Or, hey, is there anything about how your parents spoke to you? You know, start to dive into some of these places to uncover some of these deeper rooted sources of why your partner isn't going to show up trustworthy or accountable.
Or like, what does trust mean to you? Or what did trust look like in your family? So I love that curiosity piece. Now let's get to the third big element of rebuilding trust. So the first two being recognize, then it's reflection, and then the third one being having a repair plan. So because just saying I'm sorry is not enough, and then also you can't just stop at the reflection piece. That's powerful to get to the source of it, the root cause, but you then need to have a repair plan. And this repair plan is going to look different for everyone. This is not a one size fits all, but you may want to even start with the person who feels like they can't trust the other, asking them, what would help you build trust in me? Because it's in them. They likely have either some idea or they're going to know what helps them, because it is a little bit different for everyone as to what really can rebuild the perception of being able to trust someone. So that's a great question to ask them first, is what would help you build trust in me? Now we're going to give some suggestions, and again, in no particular order, and they may not work for everyone depending on what the broken promise is. First one is a check-in at certain frequencies. And you've heard us before talk about like the power of a weekly family meeting. That's like a huge hit, that episode. But just some frequency that you're checking in on the relationship. And the reason why this is important is because, especially if you're rebuilding trust from something broken, like that feels maybe bigger, it's gonna feel like constantly unsettling if trust is broken up every hour of every day. And so you don't want to feel as though like, gosh, I can't even get relaxed because it's constantly about you questioning me or not trusting me. There's got to be a check-in. We like the idea of weekly. We find that to be really helpful. So it can be the family meeting. And in that family meeting, you're like, okay, how's it going with us rebuilding trust? You know, I know you did the reflection. I know you got to the root cause. Let's talk about, have we been keeping the small promises to each other? How are we doing with that? Because again, it's got to be a team effort to rebuild this trust. Mm-hmm. Anything you want to add to this, like check-in?
Well, it could be even a short amount of time. Mm-hmm. This is why it depends on what the breach of trust or the broken promise is. So if there's one specific thing, like for instance, I was thinking of a different client where, you know, expectations and things that are assumed that shouldn't be happening or are not appropriate. For example, like on social media, one partner gets into like a DM with, you know, someone else, and you're doing that a lot, and you're sharing personal things, and you're kind of messaging this person at night, but it's just social media. Like, oh yeah, it's no big deal. You know, that can seem like a breach of trust when it wasn't maybe specifically promised, but there's a certain assumption of what is appropriate. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, getting exactly on the same page with what is appropriate, I know it seems odd because it's like, look, that should be really obvious. Mm-hmm. But just having that conversation. So then what you do is say, okay, I'm going to promise not to message this person. And then maybe you make this agreement of like 3 days. Mm-hmm. And then so what you do is you cannot question your partner's word in those 3 days.
Ideally, it might be hard, but the goal would be...
Well, then make it 1 day. Like whatever it is, you set a time frame to come back to this one particular thing and then check in. I mean, literally, whatever you need it to be, 30 minutes, an hour. I mean, I think a day is probably fine. And then say, okay, how did we do with this new promise?
Yes.
Now, when you do that a couple of times, then you can expand and maybe you make it a week, then a month. But you can't question. That's to your point. You can't keep scratching this wound. You do have to show a level of trust in what your partner has now said to you over some given period of time.
Yes. And that even is linked to the other example I was going to give of what you can do in the repair plan is creating certain boundaries and agreements. So it may be getting very specific. Just to use the phone one, for example, it could be that you are not messaging any people of the opposite sex, for example, right? I'm not going to do that unless they're a very close friend of ours and we're in a group message. It could be a boundary or agreement like that. Or hey,
even looking at particular accounts or photos.
Yes,
I realized
exactly.
that was another one.
And that's, again, we're not saying like that applies to all couples, but
Exactly.
it's if the broken promise was related to something around technology and kind of somewhat being inappropriate around that. Let's say it is around some of these promises. Okay, yeah, I'll read that book with you. Yeah, I'll look at that couples workshop that the Freemans brought up. It could be actually creating a firm agreement like, okay, to show you that I want to gain your trust again, I'm going to do that by Friday.
Yeah.
And giving them a specific agreement. So in this repair plan, it's got to have what boundaries do we need to put in place, and also what agreements do we need to put in place. It made me think of one more couple, actually. I love this couple so much because they just really do the work after our sessions. And one of the things they realized was they weren't keeping a lot of the small promises to each other, even things like, we'll get alone time at night, or we're going to do the date night once a month. And it was kind of having be kind of like, okay, you keep seeing these things. One of the things they realized was they didn't have boundaries with other family members. And so they were always saying, yes. And to friends, the friend said they were going to stop by tonight. And it totally, derailed their evening plans. And so sometimes you need to put in boundaries with other people in your life as well. And then another repair plan process could be getting outside support. We already mentioned that, but just to say it again, like sometimes you need a third party who's unbiased, who's not in the situation, to be able to say, hey, here's what I see. Here's what I can tell, you can work on and you can work on. And here's the process. So that could be a coach. It could be a therapist. That's what we're here for. That's what we do 24/7. Well, we do sleep, but throughout the day. And so again, that's where the couples workshop in Arizona can be a powerful next step to rebuild trust, or doing that relationship breakthrough session with us. And then this last example of a part of the repair plan is the person who is attempting to trust again, who's committed to working towards more trust, is that you want to make sure you do the work to process the emotions that are still there for you about that. Because let's say your partner is doing the things, they've done the reflection, and they have put in the boundaries and the agreements, and they're doing the check-ins with you, but you still are almost like watching and watching and watching. Well, it's
actually, I just got what you were saying.
Yeah.
It may have turned into an emotional trigger for you.
Exactly.
So your partner is doing like 90% of things that they've said, but because this turned into a wound for you, you built a belief that I can't trust them. You only focus on the one or two things.
Exactly.
So this is a great point, actually. I hadn't thought about this. You have to really check in for yourself. Is what I'm feeling, what I'm responding to in my own body and emotions, is this still a past emotional trigger that I need to heal? Not necessarily something that my partner, who is making progress, is actually mostly doing what they said.
Exactly. And that emotional work and confronting those beliefs isn't easy, but it's okay, what can I do to make sure I'm releasing this stored up anger, sadness, and how can I transform this belief about them so it's not a trigger? And we will talk more about triggers here in upcoming episodes and some other surprise resources we have for you guys. But at least start to recognize, perhaps I can do more of my part to forgive them, to say I do trust you, and then actually trust them, right?
Wow.
Again, this is if they're really doing their part. So it does take two to tango. This is really a team effort to rebuild this trust. Now, we know that this episode is bringing up probably a lot for some people. I mean, trust can be very emotional, and it could have brought up old triggers for you. We encourage you, if this is something you're really working through, to re-listen to the episode. Perhaps there are little key points you missed, and so make sure you're really extracting all of the important elements of rebuilding trust. And it's not an overnight thing. It really can take some time. You can't rush it. But we've got your backs. We're here for you. Check out our resources. Like we said, the couples workshop and then the relationship breakthrough session. We're here for you, and we'll continue to connect with you on the next episodes.